turn my heater off. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Lattes and Lingerie podcast. My name is Ella Pierce, and I am not a health professional, so you should not take any of this as advice necessarily, just as a philosophical conversation. If you think that you would benefit from some professional help, you should totally get a psychologist or any mental health professional. Anger is a strong feeling of hostility or displeasure. It's something natural that happens when somebody feels hurt or threatened. According to a really cool website that I found called the difference between anger and resentment is that anger is a natural feeling that is caused in a specific moment. Anger can be viewed as a reaction to a difficult situation. Anger is real, and it's an emotional reaction that is basically instinctual. The person who is feeling it has no control over whether they feel it or not. It even has physical characteristics like your heart rate increases and your muscles will tense. Another thing about anger that is different about resentment is that it can actually be used positively. And resentment is never positive. It's always harmful and hurtful to the person who's harboring it. So resentment is a feeling of bitterness that is usually lasting and has something to do with feeling like you weren't treated fairly or like you didn't get what you should have been entitled to. This is usually a combined energy soup of anger, pain, disappointment, disgust, guilt, and all of this eventually turns bitter and it makes your life difficult to live. Basically, resentment acts as a barrier. It's what people talk about when they say that you or someone has a wall up. And that basically means that you have a difficult time relating to people, especially the person who you're harboring the resentment toward. Usually you're not able to forgive and you're not able to forget. You put up that wall and there's no way to get rid of it without acknowledging that it exists. It will never go away on its own once it's there. Some symptoms of resentment include nightmares or conflict dreams, wanting to know the gossip about someone, turbulent emotions surrounding this person or news of this person. So is there somebody that you always want to know the gossip for? For me, that was my stepdad. I always wanted to know because he was always getting into trouble. And when I realized that I was still harboring resentment for him, I hated that he was still taking up space in my mind. But there was this never-ending expectation that someday he would get what he deserved. And I don't think that is unusual for me to have that kind of a thought or that it makes me a bad person. I think it's a normal reaction to this terrible action, whatever it was, action, reaction. I think it was valid, definitely. But I just kept wanting there to be this, some event that would make it like I was whole. Like, he had been punished enough, so now I'm whole again. And that's a normal desire for any human being. We all want this, we all have this drive towards an equilibrium. Mark Manson talked about this in the book, Everything is Fucked, and I just want to read a little bit from that section. He says, we're all moved to action only by emotion. It inspires action, and action inspires emotion. So it's a feedback loop, essentially, which basically is all of the things that you do in your life. You have a feedback loop for almost everything, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, but you receive positivity from all of them. Some of them are packaged in negativity, yeah, but you always get something out of whatever you do. You wouldn't do it again if you didn't get something out of it. That means that self-control, this is according to Mark Manson, that self-control, laziness, procrastination, underachievement, and impulsiveness are all problems of an emotional variety. So to talk a little bit about this equal and opposite reaction of these emotions, we need to just go to his book. He has a really great metaphor in there about if a stranger punched you in the face, how would you feel? You would obviously want that person to be punished in some way. Maybe they would have to give you money, or maybe they would go to jail if it was bad enough, right? You would want them to face the music, right? To get whatever it is that they deserve. And that's a normal human reaction. The same thing happens with good things. Like, if a stranger bought you a house, you probably shit a brick and then, like, never be able to thank them enough, and you'd never be able to repay them, right? Or you would literally repay them, like, as if it were a loan. And when we have this kind of, he calls it a moral gap, when we have this kind of chasm between what we are expecting and what's happening, then there's problems. We need them to be equalized. This doesn't just happen with humans. He points out that it also happens with animals. You know, you want to punish animals that bite, or when you hit, you know, when you stub your toe on the furniture, you might swear at it or even get rid of it. When you get sick from a restaurant, you might, you know, tell your friends never to go there. You might never go there again. And if your house gets destroyed, then you obviously have a lot of grief surrounding that. And these are all equally valid, but all equally useless after you've initially felt them. The feeling is just to teach you. Even children have feelings, right? It's just to teach you what feels good and what doesn't. And it's up to you to decide what you want to do with that. It doesn't feel good to go to the gym the first day, but it probably feels good to go the 100th day. It probably feels good to go the 10th day, right? But you have emotions and you decide what they mean. I know that something happened to you in the past that was bullshit. It was just fucking bullshit. Nobody should have had to deal with it. Nobody deserves to go through something like what you went through. And I'll tell you that you didn't deserve it, nobody would deserve it, but if it happened, you have to move on now. You have to do something about it or nothing about it and forgive. You have to move on. And there's nothing that you can do about any of it, so you have to just move on. But resentment is the inability to, or the unwillingness to move on, to actually forgive. And even if you never forget, to forgive. That's really what it's about, right? Something that is really interesting before we move on from the equalization idea is that Mark Manson talks about how the actual emotion to equalize is in itself an emotion. I'm going to read from the book here. He says, equalization is present in every experience because the drive to equalize is emotion itself. Sadness is a feeling of powerlessness to make up for a perceived loss. Anger is the desire to equalize through force and aggression. And happiness is feeling liberated from pain, while guilt is the feeling that you deserve some pain that never arrived. And so if you have a relationship with someone who has wronged you, and you are holding resentment for them, and you're constantly saying to yourself, you don't forgive and you don't forget, but then you're giving them all the power, because then whenever something goes wrong, you're waiting for someone else to apologize, and what if they never do? If they never do, then you're just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting until you're dead. If you have a relationship with someone that's riddled with resentment, then you're constantly expecting them to betray you. You're constantly expecting them to fuck everything up. And if you're putting all those expectations and you're putting energy behind those expectations, it's no wonder that they come true. And that's not to say that it's your fault. It's just that you get what you expect. And the problem with that is that you may never actually be proven right. They may never actually do anything wrong, but you spent a long time on the edge waiting and waiting and waiting. And that is a lose-lose situation. If you were right, well, then you were right and they did betray you, and that is shitty. Feeling anger is a natural human emotion, but it is a choice to become resentful. It is a choice to harbor the resentment, to keep it in you and to never let it out. You can't choose to be angry. You can't choose to feel the emotion. But if you're not feeling it and you're just thinking it, that's not anger anymore. That's resentment. And if that person never apologizes and you never get that closure, from that moment on, you are always waiting for an apology, no matter how much you deserved it, no matter how undeniably in the right you were, no matter how much you deserved to be paid back, you're always going to be waiting. I don't know your situation, of course, but there was no way that I was ever going to get an apology. And for a long time, I chose resentment because I thought that was the only option. I thought being mad about the terrible shit that happened to me as a little kid was just like the way I was going to be forever. I just thought that's normal. And it is normal. Unfortunately, it is normal for people to continually be upset about horrible things that happen to them. Like, that makes sense. I get it. But it wasn't valuing me. It wasn't benefiting me. I wasn't getting anything of value from it. So I don't want it anymore. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not going to. I'm just going to let it go. But I chose it for a long time, and it rolled up into this big thing, and eventually it came like oozing out. It was awful. I thought it didn't bother me for the longest time. Years after I would have said that I was healed from this, I would have those thoughts every once in a while, like, oh, that guy's such a douchebag, I can't stand him. Like, oh, what an asshole, I can't stand that guy. Why? You barely know them, honestly. Like, I barely knew them, honestly. Even my dad, I barely know him. And when those thoughts come up, I really don't need them. They're not valuable. I'm not going to have a relationship with him, but there's no sense in having this constant replaying tape in my mind all the time about how much he's not worth my time. Like, I'm just continually doing that thing over and over. Like, there's no sense in not having somebody be a part of your life, but then also having this, like, letting them live in your head rent-free. Like, that's not something that I want to do anymore. And when you resent somebody, that's what is happening. I thought that distance, like, both in, like, as time went on and, like, spatial distance from these people would heal it. You know, they say time heals all wounds. But not if you're ignoring them. Not if you're letting them fester. Not if you got wounded and didn't do anything about it. Of course it doesn't heal then. It heals wrong. That's what happens. If you don't go and get the proper shit done, like you don't get the stitches or you don't get the splint, shit's gonna be wrong. That's what happens. That's what happened. And after years, I would have these thoughts that would insinuate that I am apparently not fully healed from this. Like, if there was negative news about this person, I wanted to hear about it. If they were going to jail, I wanted to know. If their house burned down, I wanted to know. If their kids got taken away, I wanted to know. And all those things could have happened. But would then I feel this feeling of being whole? Would I then feel whole? Would I feel like he got finally as punished as he deserved? Probably not. It's too long. It's been too long. It's too much resentment now. The expected return is 15 years now. It's 15 years compound interest. He can't now. Even by dying, he can't make me whole. So, what's the point? What's the point? That becomes your low, grumbly background noise to your entire life. That's what it is. If you're into astrology, check out your moon sign, your Chiron sign, and your Saturn sign and see if any of this can help you sort out your resentments and help you deal with them if you have them. If you're into numerology, great times to dip into this kind of stuff are in your year 9. It's difficult. Let me tell you, it is difficult. But your year 9 or universal year 9s, which we're not going to be there for a little while, or universal month 9s. The last universal 9 was in May of last year, which was extremely difficult for me. But then the next 9, let's see, 2021 is a 5, April. So the next universal 9 month will be April. So take that for what it's worth. If that's not your thing, that's cool. You can journal about this anytime. Just ask yourself what's hurting you from before. Here are 5 reasons why we choose resentment, even though it doesn't ever do anything positive for us and only hurts us. Number 1 is that you get to be right if the relationship deteriorates. And sometimes knowing that it's over is better. To some people, knowing that it's over is better than wondering if it will end. That's not something that most couples want to consider or discuss when they're getting together or getting married or making plans, but some people do sabotage themselves in this way. Number 2 is that other people encourage this resentment. And this can happen with parents, especially. Maybe one parent encourages the resentment of the other. It could be with siblings. Maybe one sibling encourages the resentment of the other. or maybe your siblings encourage the resentment of your partner. Maybe your partner can't stand your mother, and so they feed, maybe accidentally they do this. I know I used to do this a lot, and it was always with the best of intentions for the person I was talking to, because I care so much that I thought I should be honest with this person, and even I still kind of believe that, but I just dial it back a little bit now. But the point is that it's easy for people who really care about you to accidentally put their biases on top of you, and then you have a difficult time deciding, is this something that I need to hold this resentment on for, or is this actually benefiting that person instead of me? Or am I taking this outside person's opinion too seriously upon my own, at the detriment of my own? Number 3 is that it places you ahead of them. And almost essentially, like I was saying about with my stepdad before, they're always going to be behind you now. If you never forgive them, they're never going to be next to you or in front of you. And you can always feel more secure when you feel like you're in control. But you can't control anybody. You can barely control yourself. And when you think that you can control other people, that's when shit's gonna go down, because people will always show you that they can't be controlled by you. They'll never be able to catch up to you. They'll always owe you, and you'll always feel like you're in a secure place because they owe you. That's not real though. Number 5 is that trusting people is difficult and expecting the worst. Wayne Dyer said, if you let anybody else take the blame, that means that they're the only ones that can ever change anything or fix it. But if you're willing to take the blame, even if you didn't do anything to make this happen, you're the only one that can help at this point. So do it or don't, but recognize that if you're giving your power away to somebody else, then you can only ever wait for them. Whereas if you take the responsibility no matter what, you can trust them, because no matter what happens, you know that you're willing to do what needs to be done. After I grew up, I thought that because I didn't have to live in proximity to my abusers anymore, that it was just going to go away with time. And like I said earlier, that didn't really happen. I thought I was going to be safe, but I was fooled. Because at that time, then I would just look upon everybody in my life and expect them to hurt me. A few people could hack it, like shout out to my mom who loves me unconditionally, but pretty much nobody else made it. Pretty much nobody else decided that being friends with me was worth the high expectations that I had for them. They couldn't or they wouldn't meet my expectations. And I would take it personally every time. I would always smother everybody because I was so scared that they were going to leave, so I needed to make myself so valuable to them, but I was just kind of clingy and smothering. So I would basically drown the plant. I don't feel safe because I've never felt safe. I don't feel secure in this relationship because I've never felt secure in any of my relationships. So I built up all these walls beside me. So I built up all these walls around me like a safe house. Eventually I spiraled into feeling like I was such a joke, like no one cares about me, nobody's gonna stay. I realized that basically I was abusing my body, and that was because I was abused myself. And I realized eventually I'll be alone. Wayne Dyer talks about a great metaphor about this. He says you go to the doctor and he says there's 5 things wrong with you, so he writes you 5 prescriptions. And so then you say, okay, well, go ahead and give them to me. And he's like, no, I give them to your mom and your partner and your best friend and your boss and your sibling. And they'll take care of it for you. He says the problem is not outside. The problem is inside. So the other day I was writing the caption for the tarot card of the day, which was the Wheel of Fortune on Instagram. If you're unfamiliar, the indication of the reversed, well, really, honestly, of the Wheel of Fortune is that everything is a cycle. And friend, our whole lives are basically just cycles over and over. Monthly cycles, weekly cycles, yearly cycles, decade cycles. Like there's astrological cycles and there's just seasonal cycles, menstrual cycles, moon cycles, like it's everywhere. But basically you inevitably get used to the feeling of living your life. Even if you were a billionaire, you would still have yourself, you'd still have your emotions, you'd still have your opinions, you'd still have your expectations, you'd still have your relationships, you'd still have all kinds of other people's actions impacting your spin at the Wheel of Fortune. But when you start to notice that you're the observer, the The times that you land on the incredible space on the Wheel of Fortune are still super fun. But the times that you land on the terrible side of the Wheel of Fortune, you can distance yourself from it and recognize that, like, yeah, it sucks. And you will feel that initial anger or grief or fear or whatever that actual emotion is. But once you get to that point, you pretty much have two options. Your option is option one, let this derail your life, or option two, don't let this derail your life. If you don't want this to rule your life or to derail your life, then all you have to do is acknowledge this emotion and feel it, because that's natural, that's normal. They're instinctual. You don't have control over emotions. But then you let it go. You don't let it get stuck inside you. You don't become closed down. You don't just bottle it up and push it down. This is not just like floofy advice that people give you. This is really how to live life. If you don't want to become closed down, you need to feel the emotion and then let it go. And forgive that person immediately. You don't need to worry about it. If it becomes a reoccurring thing, you don't need to forgive over and over. You just need to decide if you want to have the opportunity to forgive over and over. You don't get anything from resentment. You don't participate in the conversation in your mind about how shitty that guy is or how terrible they fucked you over. You just let them go. You gently correct them in your mind and say, no, I don't really need that. It's not that helpful. And you move on. Just forgive them, send them love, later gator. If you are already resentful and you are already bitter, that's okay. This takes a lot of time anyway. Just notice the thought, correct it purposefully, and then move on. On to the next. I don't personally think that you actually need to notify anybody that you're burying the hatchet that you had with them, especially if they don't know that you had one. It doesn't seem to be that valuable, because then you just get angry. Again, they'll get angry with you, you'll get angry with them, there'll be grief. It's not that valuable to me. Especially because the resentment is usually over anger that you supposedly forgave a long time ago. I'm not going to just call my abuser and say, hey, I forgive you. If you feel like it is your time, like if you feel like you need to do that, that's totally fine. If you feel like that's a required step for you in your healing process, totally fine. But I didn't think that needed to be done for me in my situation, because the resentments that I have don't actually matter with him. Like, he doesn't matter. Whoever you have a resentment relationship with doesn't matter. That person is not what the problem is anymore. It's really about your relationship with you. It's about how you feel safe going forward. It doesn't have anything to do with that person. And especially at the present moment, you're punishing yourself for someone else not getting punished to your preference. And you really have no reason to store those like brittle, broken, angry bones in your closet. There's no reason to do that. I know that it's easy to just say it. I know that it's easy for people to say, well, my trauma's different. I get it. If you're not ready, it's cool. If you have a different path, that's fine. If you want to hold on to your resentments, more power to you. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you that resentment doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help anybody. And if you need it to live in the life that you're living right now, okay, that's fine. And letting go of all of the problems that you've had in the past, all of the resentments that you're carrying around, might not immediately solve all your problems. But like I said before, as you experience emotions, you can experience them and let them go. And if that's all you had to do, then I'm glad you're starting now. If that isn't all that you had to do, this is still certainly step one. Emotions are just a natural reaction, but you decide how much weight to give them. All right, everybody, thank you for taking the chance to listen to the Lattes and Lingerie podcast this week. My name is Ella Pierce, and I'm so happy that you joined us here. Over on the Lattes and Lingerie podcast, you'll find conversations about all kinds of things, such as astrology, photography, looking your best, self-growth, body empowerment, all kinds of stuff. We talk about what it really means to be a human and have the human experience over here. If you like this, go ahead and leave a thumbs up or share it with a friend, whatever it is that feels right to you. Go ahead and check out down below for the socials or for information about my boudoir photography company, Cherry Tree Boudoir. If you're looking for empowerment in a very tangible way, I am your girl. And just a reminder that today is the last day to get your expose with $200 extra print credit. So just go to cherrytreeboudoir.com or click the link below to go to the expose tab, and you can put in your email there and you will get $200 to use anytime that you want in 2021 on a boudoir session for you. I just want to take a second to thank everybody who takes time to listen and watch the podcast, because today is kind of a special milestone. Today is 10 episodes, and up until now, honestly, meeting my own deadlines was really, well, it's just kind of a new thing for me. I haven't really taken myself seriously for a long time, and even though I always acted like I did, that was just like my Capricorn front end, my Taurus ego being like afraid that like this isn't safe. They're all gonna laugh at you like Carrie at the prom. And I don't know, it was like, maybe we'll be less safe if we succeed, even though we're really not that safe now. We're still working through our bullshit, right? Before this gets too sappy, go ahead and check out all the socials down below. The tarot card of the day in January is just about done, but I have a feeling we're gonna start something new over there pretty soon, so go check it out. And I can't wait until next time. Later, Gator!